The origins of horror in video games were simple, yet unsettling. Back in the early 1980s, technology was limited. There were no lifelike graphics, no chilling sound effects, just pixels and text. But even then, horror found a way. One of the earliest horror-themed games was Haunted House, 1982, for the Atari 2600. Players controlled a pair of floating eyes navigating a dark mansion, avoiding ghosts and uncovering secrets. The flickering visuals and eerie silence left much to the imagination, forcing players to create their own fears. Then came Sweet Home, 1989, a Japanese horror RPG that changed everything. This 8-bit nightmare, based on a horror film, introduced limited resources, permadeath, and disturbing imagery. It was so influential. It inspired one of the greatest horror franchises of all time, Resident Evil. But we'll get to that soon. It was the 90s. Horror was evolving. Movies like The Blair Witch Project and Scream were redefining fear. And in video games, horror was about to get real. In 1992, Alone in the Dark terrified players with its fixed camera angles and polygonal monsters. It wasn't just a game, it was a nightmare in motion. Dark, unsettling, and filled with a dread that clung to players long after they turned off their screens. Then, in 1996, Resident Evil was born. Capcom's masterpiece took horror gaming to a new level. The eerie Spencer Mansion, the moans of the undead, the echoing footsteps in dimly lit hallways. Every bullet mattered. Every door creaked open with hesitation. And then, the dogs. Those damn dogs crashing through the windows scarred an entire generation. A few years later, Silent Hill, 1999, emerged, trading jump scares for psychological horror. The foggy town, the radio static, the deformed creatures lurking in the dark. It was horror on a deeper, more personal level. Silent Hill didn't just want to scare you, it wanted to break you. Horror was now more than just monsters. It was fear of the unknown. And gaming would never be the same. The 2000s were an era of nightmares brought to life. Games weren't just about survival anymore. They were about paranoia, helplessness, and sometimes the horror of the human mind. In 2005, FEAR combined action with terror, pitting players against a supernatural force while their minds were slowly unraveling. The ghostly girl Alma, the unsettling hallucinations, the whispers in the dark. Then came Amnesia, The Dark Descent, 2010. A game that stripped away every defense. No weapons, no way to fight back. Just you, hiding, hoping the creature in the dark doesn't find you. Outlast, 2013, took things further, trapping players in an abandoned asylum with only a night vision camera. The grainy, green-tinged view of horrors lurking inches away created an unbearable sense of dread. Gamers weren't just playing horror games anymore. They were living them. Horror was no longer just in the hands of major studios. Indie developers were now delivering some of the most terrifying experiences ever created. Five Nights at Freddy's, 2014, turned childhood nostalgia into pure nightmare fuel. Animatronics that watched, hunted, and crept closer when you weren't looking. The fear of the unknown, of being powerless, was more terrifying than ever. Then, in 2014, a game that never even fully released became one of the scariest experiences in gaming history. P.T. Hideo Kojima's playable teaser for a cancelled Silent Hills game was a never-ending loop of torment. The dimly lit hallway, the chilling cries of a ghostly figure, the cryptic messages scrawled in blood. P.T. wasn't just a horror game, it was psychological warfare. And though it was erased from existence, its legacy still haunts the gaming world. Today, games like Phasmophobia, The Mortuary Assistant, and Madison continue to push horror into new, unsettling territories. Virtual reality now places players inside the terror, making every scream, every shadow feel all too real. As technology advances, so does horror. What's next? AI-driven nightmares that adapt to our fears? VR experiences so realistic we'll forget they're not real? Perhaps. One day, horror games will no longer be games. They'll be something else. Something that watches, waits, and learns, maybe. The game is already playing you. From pixelated frights to virtual terrors, horror video games have come a long way. But one thing remains the same: the fear. The question is, what will scare us next? If you enjoyed this dark journey through the history of horror video games, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more terrifying tales. And remember, the next game you play might just be playing you.